Pavan, Anil, Farhat, ladies and gentlemen, our economy is under stress and our politics is in a mess. We could do with good advice, and so I think it's very nice this evening has been organized so that we can be well advised. Now, Nature's Basket, by design, was meant to bring all that's fine in terms of food as well as wine, everything one needs to dine, from everywhere that one can think, so do enjoy the food and drink. We have more than 24 stores, and very soon we will have scores. As smaller towns begin to thrive, more Nature's Baskets will arrive. We have food for all the courses, as well as garnishes and sauces. We bring you the very best of cuisines from east and west. We have events of show and tell to ensure that you eat well. Of course, we'd like you to savor every different kind of flavor, but I think you'll also find we always have your health in mind. But when it comes to food for thought, good advice should be sought. For you, we have a perfect deal. The preparer of our thoughtful meal is both a historian and a diplomat, and I am very certain that Pavan's knowledge of the present scene and his historic perspective has been brought to bear, and so we'll hear an exposition that's very clear on Chanakya's take on our present woes. I'm curious to see how it goes. Now Dhanananda must regret the gratuitous insult that then set Chanakya on his vengeance plan. He needed to find a noble man. One day on his search he found a youngster who was very sound, a leader of his tiny band, and master of gestures that are grand. When Chanakya asked him for some alms, he generously spread his palms and offered him a herd of cows. What kind of youngster endows an unknown supplicant with a herd that he doesn't own? It sounds absurd, but Chanakya found the young man stunning for generosity and for cunning. He took the young man under his wing, and in due course he could bring the precocious boy to the throne, and in the process he could hone his political-economic skills. This story invariably thrills all who read it. India's first empire never ever fails to inspire, for Chandragupta stood very tall, and Chanakya taught him all. And in good time, when he retired, his experiences then inspired him to write the Arthashastra, which we should try to master. Now, Pavan Varma has done that. In fact, I'm sure he knows it back. And interestingly, he will try all his learnings to apply to our present situation. Is there hope for our nation? Can Chanakya show the way? Can we still save the day? Can we learn from India's sage? Can we restore the Mauryan age? Thank you.
Organize today's event, never ever let me speak after Nadir. Because everything you say sounds so prosaic and literally is prosaic. How long do you take to write these things?
You ruined my Sunday.
The last November when we had the literary festival, which LitLive has been doing now for 3 years. The Godrejs threw a wonderful party in their garden, the terrace garden, and Nadir again spoke. And again I had to follow him, you know. So. Well, welcome all of you to a Literature Live evening. I'm so happy to see such a big crowd, and I was particularly pleased that for an invitation which said 6 o'clock, at 5:40 people started arriving. And for that to happen in Mumbai is something quite rare. So I think we have developed a community of people who are serious about literature. They want to be on time, they want to listen to people, and they make sure they get there well in time. This evening you made possible by the Godrejes. I just had to pick up the phone and talk to Nadir, and he said yes. Quick entertainment. And Farad Jamal, my friend, with whom I had my book launch in Delhi when he was managing a hotel there. Now if I start introducing Pavan Varma at length, it's going to be here till tomorrow morning. He's a writer, diplomat. He's written over a dozen books, which vary in their scope tremendously. He has translated poems of Gulzar from Hindi to English. He has written on Krishna. He has written on Ghalib. He has also written on the Kama Sutra. Now perhaps we can change the evening around and get him to talk about the Kama Sutra. Because I think the subtitle of that book is Kama Sutra, How to Understand a Woman, or something like that. But I think he's made his name in writing about contemporary subjects. His first book was The Great Indian Middle Class. Then came his next book, which I think has been read by many people. It's called Being Indian. The truth about why the 21st century will be Indians. It's a bestseller, it's been read everywhere. The Economist described it as one of the few books which in a very subtle way made the complexity of India clear to a lot of people. Then his next book was Becoming Indian, the unfinished revolution of culture and identity. What he's going to talk about today is from the latest book, which is Chanakya, new Manifesto to resolve the crisis within India. What I'm hoping is he will take off from that and also go back to one of his books, the Being Indian book, and tell us if he still feels today that the 21st century belongs to India. That's something I would, in today's times when I think we are all in a state of depression, we would like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anand, for that introduction and for having me here today. I'm constantly amazed by this city, where so much appears on the surface to be sheer mayhem, and with so many other distractions, both substantive and otherwise. To have such a committed core group devoted to culture, something delicate there. But there's a lot of floating population occasionally involved in culture, or pursuits which are related to culture, but alas, that core group is shrinking. And I think we need to take inspiration from Mumbai. So thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor and privilege. I also want to thank Mr. Godrej, and of course, and all the other people who have supported this event. If Anil, you faced a handicap in speaking after him, I face a double handicap speaking after both of you. But in particular, sir, I wish I could speak in the manner you did. Even write in that manner, because I think there was only one book I wrote, it's called Yudhishthira and Draupadi, which is a long poem which explores the somewhat improbable relationship between these two pivotal characters in the Mahabharata, which is in 14-line rhymed sonnets. And I remember when I wrote it in the womb of the Russian winter in Moscow. My editor, David Devidas, read it and he told me, of course you understand that this book will sell the least of all your books because it's poetry. Nobody reads poetry. And then he said to me, but you must do something more. You must convert this entire blank verse into rhymed sonnets, which I then did. It sold a little more than I think what David expected, largely because Gulzar translated it then, and then he wrote a play on it, and then this play has been staged. But that's entirely fortuitous. But nevertheless, your poetry was compelling, sir. And I'm at a disadvantage speaking in some other meter. I'm here today to speak about my latest book, which I wrote when I was ambassador in Bhutan, which was otherwise a very busy professional assignment, given where Bhutan is as a neighboring country. But somehow the sheer serenity, beauty and tranquility of the mountains compels even those who may be otherwise inclined to do a little bit more than the normal course of thinking. And it was when I looked out of my study at the lush green mountains around my house. There was always the issue of this great country stretching out below the Himalayas, which is our home and our country called India. And there was a question that I began to grapple. And that question was, we have the legacy of an ancient civilization. And I felt that that legacy is at a crossroads with the challenges of a young republic. And the question before us, before all of us, is whether there is a link between the two. Is there something from our past that can perhaps inspire us, that can perhaps make us think along lines which are beyond the routine and the conventional today, in order to face the challenges which the young republic are facing, which it perhaps did not anticipate when it set out on this eventful journey? What is the correlation? We have a civilization which goes back to the dawn of time. It's a civilization which is marked by antiquity, by continuity, by peaks of refinement, by diversity, by assimilation. It has had the resilience for all its many faults to stand the test of time. Kuch baat hai ki mitti nahi hai hastiyan. And yet, now that we are in this phase, where we are a young republic facing, as Anil hinted, problems which are intractable, problems which require a new kind of application of mind in order to overcome them, because it is obvious to anyone who is deliberately blind that they are not going to be resolved by more of the same. That is the question. If they would be resolved by doing what we are doing as we are doing it today, then by sheer linear chronological projection you could say things will resolve themselves. But this is the time to think. And it is a question not applicable to somebody else. Your life, my life and our collective destiny is involved. And so the question that I began to grapple with was, is there something that we can learn which may perhaps reinforce my conviction that yes, we can overcome? 5,000 years before, 600 years before the birth of Christ, there was a man called Bharat. I give these random snapshots often as they strike me because I have been a student of history, who wrote a book called Natya Shastra. Many of you are familiar with it. The Natya Shastra, written 600 years before the birth of Christ, is not a compendium on the arts. It is 6,000 Sanskrit shlokas on what constitutes the aesthetic experience. Rasa. It was done here. And when we juxtapose it to how comfortably we cohabit with mediocrity today. Because this was a civilization of Maulik Soch, the power of original thought, audacious thought. Are we capable of it? And I have no desire to glorify the past. I only take snapshots. I can take some from today's time, which are inspiring. But when our seers said, Ekam Satya Vipraha Bahuda Vedanti, there is one truth, the wise people call it by different names. It was an audacious thought. Because the thinking at that time was that it is only what we believe in which is true and the rest is false. When they said, Udara Charitanam Vasudhaiva Kutumbukam, that for the big-hearted, the entire world is your family. It was audacious. Because at that time the entrenched feeling was that only those who constitute your tribe belong to you, the rest. We were capable of this kind of what I call Maulik Soch, original thinking. To look at a problem and try to see it from the prism not of stale, repetitive, stereotypical thinking, but in new ways. If we could do it, can we do it today? We had the Harvard of Asia. I go a lot to Bihar now in my new incarnation into politics as advisor to Nitish Kumar. And I was at Nalanda. Unbelievable. Read Yun Sang's account of it. 10,000 students, 2,000 teachers. The quality of the discourse. Students from as far east as Japan and as far west as Turkey. For centuries. Just the quality of the discourse and the dialogue, the interrogation, the curiosity, the questioning, the dissertation, the product, the output of sheer original thinking. Today, none of our universities figure in the first 200. What are we capable of? Is there something that we can learn? Not far from here. If you go to the Kailash temple, it's pure and simple audacity of thought translated into stone. The resolve was to make a temple to precise geometrical symmetry by carving a mountain from top down. Achieved 1,000 years ago. Why do we build Shastri Bhavan? These are questions that I began to grapple. And this kind of, as I say, the power of original thought, the synthesis that took place, remarkable, between Islam and Hinduism. It was done in this session, of which the finest example perhaps is the Taj Mahal. Or for instance, Mahatma Gandhi. If you want to see an example that sounds contemporary with which you are familiar, it is Mahatma Gandhi's adoption of non-violence to beat the most powerful military force in the world. That is original thinking. Maulik Soch. So, when I read Chanakya, I began to make this correlation. Not in mechanical terms. I was talking to some visitors from the European Union the other day in Delhi, and they are doing Europalia, India, this great festival of India, which I have also been invited to speak in. One of them had, among my other books, read or seen Chanakya's new Manifesto, someone who is a scholar of India, and he asked me, but who is Chanakya? This is the natural asymmetry, that if I ask them who is Machiavelli, I am as good as illiterate and uneducated. But the best of them can ask me who is Chanakya, and I am supposed to be indulgent. Understand. That's the cultural symmetry of post-colonized worlds, which we take in our stride. But that apart, the fact of the matter is, there was a man, more than 1,000 years before Machiavelli, who wrote the world's first political treatise. Godrej. And I'm not concerned really with the minutiae of the Arthashastra, because many of its descriptions are for that period and that time. They are contextual. But what inspired me about it? First and foremost, his intellectual rigor. The ability to identify a problem. The ability to hone in on the problem and see it for the truth that it needs to portray. This couplet, I think of it, "Tu idhar udhar ki na baat kar, tu bata ki kafile kyun lute." Don't tell me, what is the issue? We don't put our finger on the issue. We have become a nation par excellence in discussing everything except the core of the point. We need to have that ability. Read the Arthashastra and you will see two problems of his age, his diagnosis and the ability to put his finger. Secondly, he believed in leadership. We need to believe in it too. What of a kind which can carry all of it? He believed in talent. You should read in the Arthashastra the advice he gives repeatedly for the council of ministers, the kind of people who should be advised the king. The qualities both of personal rectitude training and brain power that they must bring to the table. Fourthly, contrary to the popular notion, he believed in the welfare of the people. Read the Arthashastra, there is a constant refrain that a king exists so long as he works for the welfare of all the people. So his no. By a strange perversion of chronology, people may think he is the protege of Machiavelli, except that it was the other way around, if it at all was. But he didn't have that cynicism which is often associated with him. Sixthly, he believed in economic prosperity. He says more than once that an empty treasury, if the treasury is empty, it doesn't matter what the king or the constitution says. Seventhly, he believes in a just system, where there is rule of law, where those who break it are punished, and that there is a nexus which is identifiable between crime and punishment. Eighth, he believed in analyzing systems. One of our great malaises is we only discuss symptoms. We don't analyze systems. We are either mesmerized by the past or afraid of the future, but we will not analyze the system as we have. And ninth, and this is where, if at all, the acquisition of some degree of cynicism, basically translatable into the end justifies the means, is he believed in the primacy of national interest. Where national interest is involved, that is higher than merely group or individual person. So for a variety of reasons, my takeaway from Chanakya. And I was then dealing with the problems of the young republic. And I therefore chose 5 areas which I believe constitute the core of the crisis today. This book deals with 5 areas. The first is governance. The second is the functioning of democracy. The third is corruption. The fourth is national security. And the fifth is the imperative to build a genuinely inclusive society. But my task was, in writing this, and I'm not going to bore you with all the prescriptions. Every speaker hopes to take revenge after he's finished. For those who may follow. But I wanted to get out of that syndrome, and in that sense I was doing what, without a fraction of his talent, but I wanted to go beyond the symptoms to prescribe solutions and to initiate a debate on them. I often say to the middle class which is angry, to students, that mere anger is not enough. Mere alienation is not enough. Mere discontent is not enough. If it is only that, it will be subverted or subsumed or delayed or derailed by the powers that be. Anger must engage in ideas. Then it becomes an enduring and potent force for perhaps initiating change. So you have to grapple with ideas. It's not enough to say this is wrong. What is practically possible to do about it? So therefore, in that sense, it's a manifesto. And now that I have given to you the 5 areas that this book touches, I'm going to just dwell on aspects of it for you to start thinking, because this is not a lecture. I'm going to think with you. I believe that where governance is concerned, an unfortunate and unexpected antagonism has developed between governance and the functioning of democracy. In a sense, it's a situation not contemplated by our constitution makers. Our constitution makers wrote a constitution whereby in a parliamentary democracy they assumed that one party, and at that time they thought one party, would get a stable majority and would have 5 years to govern and do for the people what they voted them into power for. But as you've seen for the last almost 20 years now, no one party gets a majority on its own, and so we've entered an era of coalitions of 22, 24 parties. And the problem is that when governments are run as a coalition, and there's nothing wrong in the coalition, I will speak of it, on a precarious majority, where you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, all energies go into political management and survival and none into the primary project of governance. And if they do, it is mostly in the nature of short-term solutions. And if you are before the elections, then large doses of populism. Because that is the nature of unstable governance. Long-term enduring solutions may take time for the dividends to flow in, but governments which live from day to day cannot have that vision. And so the compulsions change. So what do we do about it? I am not against the fact that the Banyan rule of one party has in a sense ended and there are more parties which can find reflection in government. I remember once when I was in the Prime Minister's office, one of the Prime Ministers, I won't name him, and in a cabinet meeting, there was a particular decision and the government was surviving by a majority of one. And there was one party which had only one MP in parliament. And never ever in his life had he been consulted more. So in a sense it was a democratization of the polity. He came from a region which was somewhat peripheral from where Delhi is, but he was consulted. So in a sense that the challenge is, the problem is not that, the challenge is how do we make coalitions work? Now you can think of solutions, I need to think of it. But if you believe the next election will resolve this problem, they won't. Because we will have the same situation of coalitions which are inherently precarious and whose agenda therefore is essentially and inevitably short term, which will naturally lead to the neglect of the larger project of governance. That is the problem. You can think of a solution, I can think of a solution. Glass of water, please, thank you. My solution, and I can't talk of it in detail, is that political parties must announce that coalition. Thank you, sir. Prior to the elections. People are entitled to know. Many of you think I am talking idealistic nonsense. But you will see to it that somewhere if we want a solution, we will have to move towards situations which we currently, in our cynical frameworks, consider impossible to achieve. The Election Commission has recommended more than a dozen times that coalitions must be announced prior to an election, so that the voter knows what he is voting for. And doesn't find that after he voted for party A because he didn't like party B, after he's cast his vote, both of them have come to him. The Election Commission has also said that such pre-announced coalitions should work to produce a common agenda of governance which is put before the people. I want to know that this coalition which is pre-identified, what would it deliver? Now I am putting an idea to you. If this coalition, which is pre-announced and which comes up with a common governance agenda, wins a majority, I suggest that just like the anti-defection law, no party can hold the coalition to ransom by withdrawing support for the next 3 years. You will say it's undemocratic. But what is the anti-defection law? In terms of absolute democracy, to tell legislators who want to leave a party that you can't do it is also an infringement of democracy in order to reinforce democracy, because we were aware of what was happening. Horse trading of the lowest kind. So you put a certain restriction on absolute democracy. Similarly, it's an idea. You can think of it, I talk of it in this book, that if parties who have come to power on the basis of publicly announcing their desire and inclination and agreement to work with each other on a common governance platform, if they win, no one party can withdraw on a whim, at least for a certain period of time, which gives the gestation period for this to work and take decisions and policy measures. If you were to otherwise have a coalition where tomorrow you decide something and cabinets must decide on consensus, every decision is being held hostage. So this is one idea. You can think of some idea, but all I want to say to you is that it's time for us to begin to think of, on the lines of Maulik Soch, the power of thinking out of the box. Otherwise, the next election is going to throw up a very messy situation. How do we get out of it? Do we constantly have political heat without the light of actual change on the ground. So these are some questions which we need to talk about. And a lot of these are on the anvil because the Election Commission has suggested functioning of democracy. The second subject I deal with, electoral reform is almost as old as Manmohan Singh, which is a metaphor to say it's been going on for very long. You have a situation where on report after report, the Election Commission keeps making recommendations. They go to the Standing Committee of Parliament. Only 2 items are approved, one of which is what should be the decibel of loudspeakers during the election. Everything comes back. So we are not reinventing the wheel, just read the reports. Now, for instance, the beach of all corruption in this country is the absence of electoral reform where financial transparency of political parties is concerned. It's the seed that identifies the problem. तो इधर उधर की न बात कर, तो बता कि काफिले क्यों लौटे. That's the truth. Now, one of the means by which parties collect a lot of money, and if it was not so serious, it would be humorous, is that there is a law which allows them to take contributions without naming the donor if the contributions are less than 20,000. Anyways. So, I don't want to name political leaders, so there are parties who claim that their income is whatever they declare, which of course is much less than the actual. It's say 500 crores because 485 crores are unnamed donors who made contributions of 19,999. This is crazy. So there's a way out of it. The Election Commission has repeatedly said that this law needs to be reviewed, that every rupee donated to parties needs to be done through banking channels, every expenditure of a political party needs to be done through banking channels. Today, technology allows us to digitally track the movement of money, much better monitoring is possible. But beyond that, what is wrong with political parties, once they accept this, put up their accounts on the website? What is wrong if their accounts are audited by a team between the Election Commission and a wing of the Enforcement Directorate? What is wrong if that part of this functioning of political parties comes under RTI? As a citizen, I want to know why a particular candidate from Eastern UP had a declared income of 3 crores in 7 years ago, and now personal assets have gone up to 248 crores. How does this alchemy happen? Who's there to audit it? But all of these are on the anvil of recommendations already made. I'm not talking about it. We need public pressure to implement it. So again, we have to engage with ideas. You must have a plan of action which goes beyond merely weekly exposing somebody who is corrupt and forgetting about it the next week. Talk of reform which is sustainable, enduring and pertinent to long-term change. This is one. For instance, there are other things which are very wrong in the functioning of our democracy. Criminalization of politics. In 2004, I forget the percentage exactly, but the numbers are all in the public record. 29% were people with criminal records. There was a huge hue and cry. 2009, the figure went up to 34%. I think no one is concerned. I must stand up tall when I am an Indian. And as a diplomat, I have been across the world in important forums and hold my head high. It's not in enough to be the world's largest democracy in numerical terms. We have to be the world's, if possible, most substantive democracy in terms of our conduct. Again, the solutions are there for you and me to, but you have to read this. You have to try and grapple with the solution. This is a very important class. Just as an aside, 1998, people of the middle class, if computed on a basis of rupees 1 lakh income of a household per month, figure 27 million. Today 176 million. By 2015, close to 270 million. It's an important critical mass. It's pan-Indian. It's got the same education, watches the same TV, wears the same dress, has the same aspirations. It's connected because of electronic media to the same issues instantly across the country, and the mobile phone and social media link it immediately. That is why politicians can't ignore this class anymore. But they will, if this class doesn't engage with ideas. In every protest that we have is sporadic, which dies the next day. If anger is not sustained on the basis of planning and thinking and ideas, it will die. Because that is the nature of the political class. So you have to deal with reform in the space. So criminalization of politics. What happened? There is a law, now the Supreme Court has taken action on it. Jurisprudence that we have inherited says that a politician or any human being is innocent unless proven guilty. In Bihar there is a politician who was proven guilty 17 years ago but not finally guilty. The matter relating to what cows eat. And after which, because of the tardy judicial process, he became the rail minister. Continues 18 years, 19 years. A court judgment was about to come. He is again given an appeal that the judge is related to somebody. The point is, yes, but there are larger causes beyond merely the mechanical application of jurisprudential principles. And therefore the Supreme Court has now intervened to say, if found guilty, in the first trial, you are ineligible to contest unless proven innocent. I had in fact gone a step ahead and I said, if a court thinks it fit to frame charges on prima facie evidence, you are excluded until you prove yourself innocent. You must have to follow it. But it is the way your system is so constructed, of which they take advantage. So change this law, Supreme Court has done it. We need to go further. And have fast-track courts, because otherwise one accusation is that a trial court finds you guilty and then the judicial process takes 10 years before you are proved innocent. The Supreme Court has legitimized fast-track courts. Decisions in 3 months, restricted rights of appeal. Why don't we implement? At least in matters of electoral politics, such an important part of our lives. We want to see clean people represent us. Why can't there be pressure on this question? And so on and so forth. You take up issues. You take up, for instance, the stultifying absence of discussion and debate in political parties. Absolute leaders, absolute followers, absolute soldiers. This was a time when the kind of dialogue that you can see and read between Gandhi and Nehru, between Nehru and Patel. Amartya Sen calls it the argumentative Indian, others call it the dialogic civilization. What has happened to our political parties? The kind of sacrifice, the kind of discipline, the kind of gap between public reverence and private condemnation. Something is wrong. We need to think about it. The way progenies proliferate who seem to be born leaders the moment they are born. We need to think. I have always said there is nothing wrong in someone following in the footsteps of the parent. But there is everything wrong in assuming that that person is ipso facto and axiomatically the next heir. That is where it's wrong. We need to question. These are issues. 5th of August, the Parliament will open. Please go on some website. Why I am saying is you must put your finger on the problem. Go on a website and see the power of the speaker. The speaker has near absolute powers to run a functioning house. And all chairmen of assemblies and legislative bodies have it. They are not even subject to judicial scrutiny. In its entire history, the House of Commons has not been adjourned for a single day. We are so going to be able to say that in our entire history there is not a single day when the House is not adjourned. What is happening? People walk into the well of the House. Everything that is movable is thrown around as mosaics. The whole nation watches, the young watch. And the speaker has the powers. If she names a person, thrice asks him to leave the house, he can be carried out. 3 more transgressions suspended for that duration of the session. 3 more suspended without allowances for the entire session of that house. Absolutely. But the aberration is condoned, the aberration becomes routine, what is routine then becomes normal. And the nation is subject to this depressing histrionics in the temple of our parliament, day in and day out. I have to think, there are solutions. Similarly, on corruption. There, but I have a 5-point program on corruption. First of all, as I mentioned to you, electoral reform. That's the beach. You can't solve it completely. There is no more ingenuous race than the political class. And it's not because I've joined it and I've seen it more close at hand. It's quite transparent. They'll find ways, but you can reduce the space to hide through transparent, auditable laws. That is the question. So, electoral reform. 2, the neutral intervention of technology, wherever possible. Obviate the middleman, do it online, we reduce the area of corruption. You can pay your property tax online, the tout goes. You can buy your ticket online, the middleman goes. By the way, the Right to Public Services Act in Bihar and Madhya Pradesh. If you have any time, just study it. For everything can be asked for online, 50 services, 10 departments, most of the areas where a citizen has to interface with government. Time limits given. For every day of delay, 500 rupees penalty on the concerned officer. 3 crore petitions have been disposed of in this way. 72 IT experts monitoring each application. Some of them on salaries higher than the Cabinet Secretary of India. It's possible. States are doing it. The neutral intervention of technology. 3. Any matter relating to disposal of state resources, land, mining, space, spectrum, put it under transparency laws. It's there, it's recommended. The Supreme Court has said it. It can be done. It's just this inhibition of the political class to do so. As the Supreme Court judge said, put it into the sunlight. Fourth, there needs to be some nexus between crime and punishment. I say to you today, if we cannot have positive role models, at least let us have some negative role models of people who are caught if they do something wrong. There is no nexus there. For that you need judicial reform, which is another matter. This is the most entrenched institution that is resisting reform is the judiciary. Fifth, of course we need a Lokpal. We need an ombudsman. Many countries have it. The judiciary needs one of its own, the executive needs one. But if you don't give it prosecuting powers and investigative powers, it means nothing. The fine print can change. There are many versions of the bill, but without this it means nothing. And finally, I am cutting out national security. I can give another lecture on that. But for instance, on an inclusive society, I am going to leave a thought with you that we cannot claim to be civilized or developing if so many of the unacceptably poor in such large numbers are in our country. We have to think about it. My book, The Great Indian Middle Class, apart from other things, was a critique of the social insensity of the privileged. As a foreigner once told me, the privileged in India don't notice poverty. We've begun to take it for granted. It's everywhere around. It doesn't scrape the skin. We have to do something about that. We cannot have the largest number of the people who can't read and write. You cannot have so many malnutrition children. You have to do something about it. But there's an issue I raise in the book. And I ask this question, that are we adopting the best instrumentality to make a dent here? Is state altruism, state-sponsored welfare schemes which throws money from the top down and in the process sets up an entire scaffolding of corruption? While this 27 and 32 rupees is done in air-conditioned rooms in Delhi, as a newspaper called it, the highly profitable art of imagining the poor. Is this the only way we can make a dent? To ask ourselves, the food security bill, I am all for food security, I support it. But if that scheme is going to use the same discredited PDS system, where one survey showed that 67% of what is sent down the PDS does not reach the intended beneficiary. And if it is going to use the same genocidal food corporation of India, 25 million tons wasted, the height of inefficiency in spite of huge subsidies from the state. What is going to reach? Who is going to benefit? Is this the only way? They have to ask us. The next is industry. 24, 26, 28% depending on what figure. Agriculture contributes only 16% to your GDP when 600 million people live off agriculture. And agriculture continues to grow at 2 to 3% every year, only. It's the most neglected area of your economy. Unless there is a quantum jump in agricultural productivity, how long can you just keep providing food security? I was saying this to somebody who was interviewing me earlier, when the tides rise, even boats stuck in the ground rise with it. In the last 2 years, I am not saying this because I am partisan in Bihar, because of continuous pushing to create new innovations of agriculture. Paddy cultivation in the last 2 years has grown by 55%. It makes a dent in what people eat and what they earn. So we've got to think of other ways. And above all, we have to create a more caring society. If you want to set up an NGO to do some work, most government departments look upon you almost as a criminal. The process is so tedious, the rules are so cumbersome. Government believes it has a monopoly on altruism. Doesn't work. You have to create more stakeholders in society, in change. And you have to, through that process, create a more caring society, because I can enunciate for you a principle of economics that the best intended law will be subverted in an uncaring society. We have to change that. But for all of the reasons that we can change and must change, I'm still an optimist about it. I still believe we have it within us to achieve these goals. What we have to do, that Maulik Soch has to come, power of original thought. If we can do that, I think the 21st century could be partly ours. And I'll end with a couplet of Mirza Ghalib. If that happens, we can say, "Mat pooch ki kya haal hai, mera tere piche. Tu dekh ki kya rang hai tera, mere aage." Thank you so much.
Pavan, one of the best speeches I have heard in my life so far. I'm not very young. Thank you. If we introduce one reform, that our judicial system, at level of a small court to the Supreme Court, the decision making is done within a specified time, I think all our problems will be solved. How much do you agree with this?
No, I agree with you that one of the most needed reforms is the judiciary. And the current system, this is the only judiciary in the world which appoints itself. In the world. And what is the consequence? Allahabad High Court. 50 vacancies of High Court judges and 50 lakh cases pending. But who's there to ask? In the Times of India, in one of my columns, I took on the judiciary slightly. I had 3 Supreme Court judges calling me Pavan and so on. So that's not the issue. It has to be taken up on a sustained basis. Judicial reform, the Judicial Accountability Bill as currently drafted by Mr. Kapil Sibal is a flop. It pivots around the central issue. You've got to be, we need to be.
And I think there just to add, the contempt of court, particularly, because the judiciary, when it comes to contempt of court, to itself, is very, very strict about it.
If I may ask a question.
Yes.
I think, thank you very much for a very enlightening speech. My question is very controversial. And I think that is something which is there in the minds of all the people that will be here. We are facing an election. On one side, we have Modi, who we know from the 2002, what happened in Gujarat. On the other hand, we have Rahul Gandhi, and we are not sure about him at all. In this situation, what is the option? What does a common man do? People who are sensitive may sometimes want not to exert their rights because they don't know what to do in this situation, because neither of them is a solution which might lead India to a more glorious future. Do you have any views on that? Thank you.
Well, let me, before I answer you, say that I completely share your sense of despair if choices in politics are limited. However, I think in such situations you look at your local candidate. who has done as much credible work as you would like in your own areas. Beyond that, I think there should be a larger vision for the country which goes beyond your local region. See, for a long time on television and in my writing, I never took the name of an individual. I talked about what is our idea of India? What is the vision for India? What is the kind of India which will be congruent to the governance project and to the safety of your life and my life? And what is the kind of India that could resurrect the kind of communal division which we have taken 60 years to overcome or almost overcome? The people of India want to swim away from the islands of religious exclusivism and to participate with the dividends of the secular mainstream. So that's my vision of it. You can have a different vision. It's not about that. But have a vision. Let choices be informed by deliberation and thought. That is what this middle class can do.
Excuse me, sir, I have a question. I'm deeply and thank you for that amazing insight into what we need to keep in mind for the next election. Mr. Shamdanikar's movie that I was introduced to recently, Welda Naka, talks about everything that you said about criminalizing the issues that occur all over the country. And my question to you is, the youth, a lot of my friends are stepping out of the country to study, and probably they want to stay over abroad because they see, a better value of life is the phrase that is used. So how is it that we can contribute to it? Yes, social entrepreneurship is one thing that we can do, but then there's that much amount of time that it takes to overcome certain filters, if I may call it softly, that we have to cross before we achieve a certain amount of success. So somebody like you who's been there and done that, what do you have to say?
I say, go abroad if you need to add to experience, but ultimately that's another of my books, Becoming Indian. That's something I believe. Do you understand a bit of Hindustani? Can I answer you in a couplet? And I'll explain it. Palat rahe hain Garibul Watan. Garibul Watan is exiles. Palat rahe, they are coming back. Palat rahe hain Garibul Watan, palatna tha. Wo koocha. Ruh kashe jannat ho. That place may be the mirror image of paradise. Wo kucha, ruh kashe jannat ho. Ghar hai ghar phir bhi. बार बार जमाना यहाँ से गुजरा है, नई नई है रह गुजर फिर भी. Come back. There's work to do. There's work to do. And in doing that work, we don't need to become Mahatma Gandhi. We don't need to renounce. We need to do whatever we are doing better, but we need to think a little more, to read a little more, to be engaged with options, alternatives, and ideas a little more. That is important. And I can't blame the young if they feel alienated, if they feel almost that they are out of the political discourse. Nobody will invite you back. Gate crash.
I had a question for you about bureaucracy. I was saying that you've been a part of the bureaucracy. Well, don't you think the bureaucracy has a very large part to play in and a responsibility?
Yes, I fully agree with you, and I can never hide the fact that I have been part of that system. Nor do I wish to. But one thing I have discovered. Take away discretionary powers from a bureaucrat, that halves corruption. It's happening much too slowly because there are vested interests involved. Secondly, I have begun to notice now that I have several principal secretaries working for me. Bureaucrats are like litmus paper. They take on the color of the political leadership. During Lalu Yadav's time in Bihar, and I can say this openly because the state was literally reduced to near zero, the same bureaucrats did no work. When the political executive changed, some of the best bureaucrats are there in Bihar. And I've seen it happen time and again.
Slightly different slant of question. You know, when you were talking about Shastra and Chanakya, why is it that all the former great civilizations, Rome, Greece, Egypt, India, why are we in the 21st century have not fulfilled that heritage? Why what were the greatest civilizations fallen so far behind?
Well, I don't know if we've fallen so far behind, but it is precisely because there is a background which is so vast behind us that shorter periods of transition appear to be a precipitous fall. It's not that. 60 years is a very small period in a nation's life. But if you have to justify that tag and label, then we have to do more. Believe me. The challenges of the young republic today require application of mind and fresh thinking and sustained action. We cannot abdicate that responsibility. You cannot be both great and inactive. So we have to take a part of that responsibility. And there have been periods in this 5,000-year journey where past glories have become far less visible, but you've come out of it. That's why I said I began by saying I began to think the modern empire also declined.
Mr. Varma, thank you very much for brilliant exposition of this, your thought and ideology. My question relates to something which you've not touched upon today. You said that you're not going to talk about the national security issue, and the other issue which you didn't talk about is the international relations. But very briefly, I just want to ask you that you've been a diplomat all your life. How is it and why is it that we do not have even a basic friendly relationship with any of our neighbors today? Taking right from Pakistan, Bangladesh, even Maldives and Bhutan we don't have, Nepal also. How are you going to be able to deal with the other countries in the world if we can't get along with our own neighbors? And why is that?
Well, because partly it's much easier to deal with the other countries than your own neighbors. There's an old Chinese saying, why do you hate me? I have not helped you. And that often kicks in with a large country and a smaller country as neighbors. But that apart, I cannot disagree with you that there's been a lack of focus in our foreign policy. There is a need for clarity. You need a vision. Paradoxically, although I don't agree with the necessity or need of non-alignment today, but at that time it was again one of those Maulik ideas, power of original thought, and India grabbed the attention of the world. As a newly independent country which had the courage to proclaim its ability to stay away from both the factions. We've lost that. We've lost that. And on national security I didn't want to speak because A, I didn't have time. But I've never seen a country in a more troubled region of the world with such complete chaos in its three wings which deal with it: foreign policy, defense and intelligence. It took the cabinet 13 months to read the note prepared by the Home Ministry on setting up the NCTC, National Center for Counterterrorism, in a country where we have to live with it. Because don't underestimate the problem. You have externally sponsored terrorism. You have homegrown terrorism. You have 15,000 kilometers of boundaries with 8 neighboring countries. You have 2 unresolved boundaries. You have insurgency. figure. 200 districts, 40,000 square kilometers are not under your control inside the country. And you have a cabinet committee on security which doesn't meet for months. So I can, another time or separately.
That leads me to a question, which is that, is India really governable at all? You know, it's so large, it's so diverse, and there's so many pockets all over the place which are so very different from each other. Is it possible? Are we too big?
No, I believe.
Add to that question. What makes you think that the common land on the road wants change India?
Your question is easy to answer because if they can't see what's good for him, which they see much better than some of us, they know they want change, they just want direction, many of them. Some of them know what to do also. So people want change when the water begins to rise at a certain level above the head. And that's what's happening today.
I'm not so sure on account of the fact that many of them jumped on the I've also been a bureaucrat, police officer. So many of them want to jump on the bandwagon and benefit from whatever drift is happening.
I want Pavan to get back to my question.
Yes.
Which you interrupted.
Anil, you see, it was, pardon my saying so, it was one of the more entrenched outlooks that the British perpetuated. You know, Winston Churchill famously said that to call India a nation is to call the equator a nation. There is no such notion. And it's normal to have that ideological bias for a country that wants to justify why it is there to rule you. I think you proved it wrong. India has emerged, and in being Indian, I have a chapter on the new pan-Indianness which has developed around India due to a variety of factors. Education, mobile telephony, job mobility, television, films, cricket, I don't know, there's a whole lot of factors where the salad bowl of India is increasingly becoming a melting pot. Look at it in attire. It's a loss also, intangible heritage. You never see the traditional dress, same safari suit or whatever. The point is that today an Indian in any part of India can have more than one symbol by which he or she can identify with the country as a whole. Many of the laws have permeated to a point where there are some uniformities. Aspects of running the country have acquired. So it's a difficult country to govern, but I don't believe it's an impossible country to govern. And it's been done in the past.
So, on average, it may be very intelligent compared to many people outside, but in terms of teamwork, we really falter. An average American teamwork, quite often I've seen, doesn't question. How are we going to address this issue of being able to work in a team for a team goal?
It's an issue. It's an issue because, you know, I can speak, I don't say it in the way some leaders have said it, but I'm just saying I'm a Hindu, I was born one. So Hinduism is a very individualistic religion. In some religions there's a Friday congregation, a Sunday meeting. A Hindu will go put money in the hundi, pray for his personal salvation and leave. And every god has a price, mostly. I mean, I come from Banaras, you walk down the ghats, filth, excreta, they will tiptoe around it, go into the Ganga, look at the sun, take 7 dips and leave. It is a failure. We are too individualistic and we need. But again, I do not put the creation of a sense of team spirit beyond a good leader. It can be done. It's been done in the past. I think that lady was...
One last question there.
Yeah.
I think she drew my attention.
Okay, just very quickly. I think the optimism in you is amazing because if I had subtitled your book, it would have been the
almost insurmountable, amazingly innumerable crises within India. It's not just a crisis that we face, and I know that comes across as pessimistic. The issue of we're a young republic at 60 years is a bit of a deception, I feel. I'm sort of tired of hearing that, because we came to be a republic when we had the example through history of numerous other republics that had sort of struggled with these ideas, grappled with these ideas, and come to birth. So I feel that we sort of use that as an excuse to sort of say, we're just 60, 65, 62, whatever it is. And I think we need to kind of leave that thinking behind. Two other quick notes. I think that what you said about the judiciary is absolutely correct, but till you separate the police from the political powers, it is not just a matter of the guilty having to prove themselves innocent. We are in a situation that we have to prove that you being innocent are innocent, with false charges and the easy ability to sort of frame anyone. Your idea that we need big ideas is fantastic, and I would love to see an India where we can do that. But if you can't execute the basic idea in the state of Maharashtra, like wanting to kiss your girlfriend in public without being arrested, where's the hope for great ideas? And lastly, with all due respect,
kissing your girlfriend is a great idea.
It is, but it's punishable. And a last question. With all due respect, you say that the agricultural sector is the most neglected sector in this. I completely disagree. I think it is women who are the most neglected in this country, because still we solve the issue of women's empowerment and violence against women. All these problems will continue to plague us for the rest of our history. So that's my opinion.
Just to take your questions from the reverse of their sequence. Yes, when I said agriculture, what I meant was that in the major sectors contributing towards the nation's GDP, agriculture is the most neglected. I did not mean to say there are not problems which are as bad or intractable and need to be. So women, yes, I agree.
Women contribute to the GDP without ever being accounted for.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's why, again, because I'm dealing with some of these issues, 50% reservation for women in panchayats in Bihar, the largest anywhere. You know, first election, women.
In Parliament we are only 6%.
I know, that's a bill pending, and you know the reasons for it. But in panchayats, and again, this was the Prime Minister I was working with as a bureaucrat, he did it for populist reasons. He never realized he has initiated a revolution. India has the largest percentage of reservation in local bodies for women in the world. 1/3, 33%. Bihar has made it now 50%. And what is amazing, Anil, is that in the first such election, women front for husbands, brothers, and fathers. By the next election, they said they rather enjoyed some of the powers, the perks, the direction they can give to the allocation of money, and they become a little stronger. By the third election, they are not asking their husbands, brothers, and fathers. It's a process of social change in the country. And Bihar is 50%, a scheme for the girl child, for the bicycles, huge. So anyway, we've got to do more there. I can't agree with you. I've forgotten about the judiciary. Police. Now, the greatest joke in this country is that the CBI is free. Even the director CBI over a drink will laugh at this. And part of the reason is that he's hoping after he retires to become a governor. So then you are natural puppets for the political class to manipulate. Nobody retires now. So obviously that I agree with you, that needs to be done. And incidentally here the Supreme Court has given a judgment on police reform. I don't know why they don't do the contempt business. Nobody is implementing it. So that I agree. I think I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. What's the first part of your question?
The 60 years of Republic.
Now 60 years, till the turn of the 19th century in Britain, it was famous that you had pocket boroughs. One nobleman who controlled all the votes. I agree. We need that impatience for change. And in India, the challenges are so huge that every year that is wasted is criminal. You know, when the economy grows at 5%, the job market is contracted by 20%. This whole demographic dividend of India will unravel when you have the young on the streets. There's no time. We've got to move faster, but let's not lose a sense of perspective. That's what I mean.
Okay, one last question.
So mine is about inclusiveness. I want to tap that a little bit more. We're going to see clearly that, so industry is already saying they're targeting bottom of the pyramid. We've got populist measures that come up in the next 15 to 16 months till the election. Once all the dust settles, we're all a little uncomfortable about participating in this inclusive way. So what would you say is one or two big things that we should expect in the next few years that we should look at to be more inclusive? What should we
to be involved.
Yes, to be more involved.
Okay. I think that one thing that we can all pick up, let's sign a petition with a million signatures or whatever figure you like on electoral reform. The Parliament has promised to convene a special session on electoral reform which it has never convened. Let's put public pressure. Let's put pressure on criminalization of politics. There are issues that you can pick up, but you must know the subject.
But Pavan, here, if I may interrupt you, because this is a thought which was going through my mind when you were speaking. You talk of 250 million Indians of the upper middle class in a couple of years. But how does that become a movement? Who leads it? And I think this is a perennial question. What happens is our politicians exploit the poor and the uneducated to get votes. And people like us become completely irrelevant.
That's my point, Anil, that if you are a critical mass of that size, see, I still remember the discourse in the 80s. If I talk to a politician friend and spoke about middle class living, he said, yeah, vote to karne jate hain. And their numbers were also small. I told you in 1998 it's 27 million. It didn't matter. Why is people on social media? Why are they reaching out now? It is because this class has become not as important as it should be. Still very fragmented, still concerned only with issues that directly relate to its own well-being than to larger issues. Still insular and insensitive to other needs of society. But I can trace it to you for Delhi. Jessica Lal case, some of you would remember, it was a case which created great outrage. Nanditan will know it well. The middle class was, for the first time, as someone who's its chronicler and observer, was out in protest. For the first time on an issue outside their own Bijli Party. Anna Hazare, for whatever the movement may have become today, 80,000 people were on the road the day Anna Hazare was released from Tihar jail and his journey from there to the Ramlila Maidan on a weekday. 90% of that 80,000 were middle class Indians who were out on the issue of corruption. In Tony, South Delhi, 20 resident welfare associations had come out at night to do candlelight vigils. There was an issue that fired their imagination. It's uncoordinated. It's staccato, it's fragmented, it's sporadic. Anil, you can do it, I can do it, you can do it. The point is to try and set up a pan-Indian kind of coordination on national issues, where you build the pressure. By the way, our powers, and I'm not speaking now for the middle class, the powers are disproportionate to your size even now. You control a lot of the media, you're educated. You are in constant touch as an extension of your fingers with your mobile. There are powers. We must learn to be more coordinated.
Thank you so much, Pavan. This was a wonderful